Welcome to the Michael Mercy YouTube channel, an 80s nostalgia channel for adults to revisit the golden age of heroes. This is not a children's channel. Kids under the age of 13 should only watch these videos with their parents. Nerdmaste!
You shall learn a harsh lesson.
Yo Joes, it's time for another 80s toy history lesson. The first single character's history we looked at in depth was Megatron. And the second one is an equally deadly and dangerous foe of the 80s.
Storm Shadow!
The Cobra Ninja.
The fates have smiled on me this day.
Very true. If you want to call the Patreon tribe the Fates. This history lesson comes courtesy of the Patreon special missions request of Iron Lord's Podcast,
We shall soon learn the eternal secret together.
who has been waiting with the patience of a ninja for this deep dive into one of G.I. Joe's most enigmatic characters. The first appearance of Storm Shadow in media was in issue 21 of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero Marvel comic in early 1984. The unforgettable silent interlude issue where Snake Eyes sneaks into Cobra headquarters to rescue a captured Scarlet. The exchange between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow would be brief, but their destinies would be forever entwined. The proverbial yin and yang that created chaotic balance and tumultuous harmony within the world of G.I. Joe.
Be a ninja warrior. You must have perfect balance.
The final page of the issue would reveal just how linked the two were and would forever be. There, on both of their forearms, revealed from clothing being torn away during their skirmish, was a mysterious red hexagram tattoo. The 63rd hexagram of the I Ching, to be exact, the ancient Chinese text that contains the wisdom of the ages, over 2,500 years worth. The 63rd hexagram, usually referred to as after completion or already done, has many interpretations.
I do not understand.
My personal take on it is that it reminds us to move forward with the tools and wisdom we've gained during our last great challenge. And if that challenge inflicted damage, we should ensure that that damage be left behind. Sever ties to difficulties, hardships, evilness. Use your energy to carry what is of value to you going forward instead. For those who can't let go of past difficulties,
It is hopeless.
agreed.
The information you possess may prove invaluable to Cobra Commander.
It certainly was for a while. The first Storm Shadow figure was also released in 1984. And while I wasn't a fan of handing over my mom and dad's hard-earned dough for bad guys,
He pulled some of that ninja hocus pocus on me.
yeah, I was completely mesmerized by Storm Shadow hanging on the peg. I barely noticed the Cobra symbol emblazoned above his backpack and accessories, and was locked by his intense gaze. The same laser focus that Bruce Lee said defined a warrior. He didn't seem evil to me. He seemed to have the same steely grit as the Joes had. I guess you could say the seed for him being a Joe was planted right there in his 1984 card art. Plus, look at all the weapons he came with. A short and long sword, nunchucks, bow, and a backpack that could hold them all? And open?
Anyone can use a weapon, but the ninja is a weapon.
That's right, in addition to these amazing, tiny, intricate accessories, Storm Shadow's figure looked awesome as well. Wrappings on his legs and forearms, conveniently hiding the I Ching tattoo, plus more non-removable weapons sculpted into his belt, throwing stars for freedom to catch, and a knife. Even though I hadn't read the comic yet, I had a peculiar feeling this guy just seemed to go with Snake Eyes. The peculiar Joe that I thought was a Cobra the first time I saw him 2 years prior, adorned in black from head to toe. This guy was dressed in all white, plus had a file card that was just as mysterious as Snake Eyes, with no file name given and birthplace information classified. One didn't seem complete without the other, so I had to have them.
Storm Shadow, no!
Sorry, Lady J. This is one 80s villain I had to have, even if I didn't know anything about him.
Yo, Joe!
And we get to know him a little better in September of '84 when he debuted in the G.I. Joe Sunbow animated series. Our first glimpse of him in animated form was in the intro to Revenge of Cobra Part 1, throwing a pair of throwing stars before being kicked in the back by, that's right, the silent master himself, Snake Eyes. He appears later in that first episode when Destro orders him to raise the temple. A hefty task.
Storm Shadow, raise the temple!
Which is actually easier than it sounds. You just have to flip a switch. Not exactly making the most of the wide array of skills of a ninja. And I'm not sure why Destro couldn't just turn around and pull the switch himself. I guess every egomaniac needs an audience, and ninjas are good listeners.
I shall destroy G.I. Joe with the irresistible power of nature itself!
No wonder he quit the group a few years later. Sheesh. Duke and Snake Eyes are captured in that episode, but Storm Shadow is conspicuously absent when they get loose for a moment and start beating up on the Cobras, robbing us of a Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow animated showdown. And when a ninja vanishes, he really vanishes. He isn't even in the second episode of Revenge of Cobra. We see him again in Part 3 though, where he has his epic showdown with Spirit.
I feel another presence. That presence feels you as well.
Yes, in the G.I. Joe Sunbow animated series, Storm Shadow's arch nemesis wasn't Snake Eyes, it was Spirit, which I always enjoyed because it worked on the same level as the comics rivalry with Snake Eyes. It was just as much a philosophical and spiritual rivalry as a physical one. Storm Shadow tries to take Spirit out with throwing stars, but the attempt is thwarted by Freedom, Spirit's guardian eagle.
Cobra!
And the two engage in mortal combat. After taking a tumble over the falls, they work together to carry the piece of the Weather Dominator out of the water, and then take a moment to salute each other in a show of respect before continuing their battle. I can't express how cool this moment was when I first saw it, and just reinforce the initial sense of warrior-like honor I had about Storm Shadow from his card art. I mean, Cobra was a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world. They were evil, vile, reprehensible, which obviously meant disrespectful too. And here was one of their emissaries, working with a Joe? Bowing to him? For those who never read the comics, I think it was this moment that the seeds were planted for Storm Shadow to eventually become a G.I. Joe. After their duel ends in a stalemate, due to the lack of oxygen in the cave, both agree to try to think their way out of the situation when they accept that fighting their way won't work.
We must dwell on this.
This is another moment that resonates after all these years, and shows why G.I. Joe has had the lasting power that it's had. Because it had the courage to deviate from just being a show about fighting, and recognize that in some situations, might doesn't make right. How many shows or comics can you think of where the rivals both agree that physical superiority serves no purpose in their current situation, and then proceed to have a think-off? Violent toy commercial show My Tookus. In this particular battle of wits, Spirit comes out on top with a solution of how to escape the flooding cave. While all Storm Shadow had to contribute was pessimism.
Your theorizing is too late.
And in another moment that made many do a double take, Storm Shadow acknowledges Spirit's effort and awards him the Dominator part.
You have saved my unworthy life. The Weather Dominator shall be yours.
Talk about a strong sense of honor. What's this guy doing with Cobra? Almost as if he's there for some reason other than world domination. He shows up later in that episode to save Spirit's life just as he's about to be crushed by falling ice.
We are even now.
Seriously, how's any kid supposed to look at this guy as a villain? They both agree, though, that the score is even now, and the next time they meet,
We meet as enemies.
And Storm Shadow skates away. Behold, the Northern Ninja!
You will suffer for that insult.
Revenge of Cobra 5 is where Storm Shadow finally gets to shine, though, in all his ninja glory. He silently sneaks into G.I. Joe headquarters, while Zap and Short Fuse get an uneasy feeling.
You hear anything? Nothing. Neither do I. That's what bothers me.
He scales the base and sneaks inside, and again we're denied a Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow showdown. Only Timber is inside with a green shirt, and the Wolf is the only one that can sense the presence of the young master. He throws a star that has gas in it, and it incapacitates the Joes and Timber. But we're rest assured by the passing out Joes before they drift off into dreamland that it's just sleeping gas.
Sleeping gas.
He then pulls some Mission Impossible style stuff years before Tom Cruise was doing it to get back the piece of the Weather Dominator that he let Spirit have in the previous episode in order to get into Cobra's good graces again, as well as the fans. Their rivalry would be rekindled in Countdown for Zartan. And this time, he'd get the better of the G.I. Joe tracker. But once again thwarted by Freedom the Eagle.
Go, Freedom! Get help! Ha!
In fact, nobody had Storm Shadow's number in the series like Freedom. He even catches one of Storm Shadow's arrows later in the same episode. Just as before, Storm Shadow acknowledges that the fight must end or both will perish, this time thanks to Zartan's bomb.
I must put an end to this fighting or we will both be destroyed.
Zartan in disguise sneaks up from behind and knocks Spirit out, and we once again see Storm Shadow's sense of honor.
You had no right to interfere, Zartan!
Not one to stand by and allow such injustices to occur, Storm Shadow dispatches of the Dreadnoks and frees Spirit.
Noble enemies should not be treated in this fashion.
Which not only made Storm Shadow seem like a character of great integrity, but Spirit as well, since he commanded more reverence and respect from Storm Shadow than any other Joe in the Sunbow series. They'd meet once more in Satellite Down.
I felt your presence, Spirit.
Which I really appreciated, since there were quite a few cartoons in the 80s that had no sense of continuity. But we get to see these two meet, develop a sense of respect for each other, and then eventually see that respect deteriorate and vanish by the end of the episode. A rare, satisfying story arc, especially considering it didn't take place over a 5-parter, or even a 2-parter like most other Joe story arcs. The only other character in the Sunbow series that owned Storm Shadow as badly as Freedom was this guy.
Got a problem, Pilgrim?
If you thought Storm Shadow was tough walking around in the Arctic without sleeves, Quick Kick one-upped him by doing it without a shirt or shoes. In the end, like he had done with Spirit, Storm Shadow bows to Quick Kick in defeat. Well, more like collapses unconsciously. With all the great writing that built Storm Shadow up to be a serious threat, as well as a character of great integrity, I always felt this episode did a lot of damage to his character, reducing him to just another evil Cobra henchman, and then being soundly defeated by the new 1985 figure. It's a rare case of an old favorite taking a severe backseat for a new product in 80s G.I. Joe. If you found Storm Shadow's character development lacking in the Sunbow animated series, then the 80s G.I. Joe Marvel comic is for you. Everything is revealed about him in the comics. Real name, Thomas Arashikage. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, from the Arashikage ninja clan. The name is derived from the Japanese word for storm, Arashi, and shadow, Kage. His history with Snake Eyes goes further back than many of us would have expected, as a member of a long-range recon patrol along with Snake Eyes and Lonzo Wilkinson, codename Stalker. After the war, Storm Shadow would become Young Master in his clan alongside the Hard Master and Soft Master, and invited Snake Eyes to join his family since he no longer had one of his own. A misunderstanding would serve as the basis of the rivalry between the two for years and several reboots to come. Snake Eyes rose in prominence due to his great skill, and dissension arose when he, the outsider, seemed to garner more favor with the Hardmaster. One of Storm Shadow's arrows pierced the Hardmaster, killing him, and Storm Shadow fled the clan, seemingly guilty of the crime. But the arrow had actually been stolen and fired by Zartan, and Storm Shadow's involvement with Cobra had simply been to learn who had been responsible for the Hardmaster's demise. After a short case of death, no big deal for a ninja,
An impressive display
Of the ninja's power, yes.
Storm Shadow was reborn as a G.I. Joe.
Storm Shadow betrayed me?
The second version of the figure was released in 1988, and this one proved to be one of the biggest surprises for Joe fans. For all intents and purposes, it just looked like a cool update of the Cobra Ninja I had gotten in 1984 and had seen on the Sunbow animated series, which had ended a year before with G.I. Joe the movie. I had been completely unaware of his change of allegiance in the comics, but there, on the back, under the file card picture, revealed his affiliation with the Snakes was no more.
Our alliance ends now!
Storm Shadow was now a G.I. Joe, and he was now adorned with Arctic camo. Bonus points from this Snow Joe, and the Arashikage tattoo was emblazoned on his forearm. His bow got a major upgrade, and he traded the nunchucks in for a deadly claw that could be attached to his hand. And he also included a big, bulky red backpack that could hold a red sword.
This weapon was centuries old.
The file card brought everyone up to speed in case they hadn't read the comics, and confirmed Storm Shadow's involvement with
Cobra!
had been a ruse all along to determine his uncle's killer. And now Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes would work in tandem in the remaining Marvel comics as well as the Deke series.
This is not an honorable way for a warrior to meet his end.
Agreed. Luckily, there'd be many more worthy incarnations of Storm Shadow in the decades to come, but that's a history lesson for another episode.
Agreed.
Thanks again to Iron Lord's podcast for the request, and to all the fine folks that power this time machine with their energon of enthusiasm and Carium crystals of caring. And a warm welcome to new Patreon tribe members Jess J. Bell, GG87, Anthony Whitehead, and Brandon Millwood, as well as Anthony D. Great, who saw the highest contributor level of Ninja and said, "Not high enough," and put in his own custom pledge. Welcome, Grand Ninja Master. And thank you, Brian Buser, for the increased pledge to Master Sergeant. Enjoy the ad-free advanced screenings, good brother. Want to throw some of your own guzzling into the tank to power the flux capacitor? Head over to patreon.com/Michael Mercy. Feel free to share on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or elsewhere. Leave an Arashikage comment and maintain Zen because
We shall meet again.
till then, Matane.